When you hear the word mummy, chances are your mind jumps straight to Egypt. But the truth is, cultures across the globe have been preserving their dead for millennia. From sacred rituals to freak accidents of nature, the mummification phenomenon isn't limited to golden tombs or desert sands. In fact, some of the most astonishing mummies ever uncovered weren't even intentional. They were frozen in time by the very environments that claimed them. The mummies we're going to discuss in this video range from the super fascinating to the downright bizarre. Let's start off with number 15, Renswuren Man. In 1871, the body of Renswuren Man was pulled from a German bog, preserved by centuries of acidic peat and cold. But this wasn't a peaceful death. An autopsy revealed a violent end, a triangular hole in his skull, and other blunt force injuries, suggesting he was beaten to death. He was likely between 40 and 50 years old when he died, sometime during the 1st or 2nd century CE. His killer left no clues. After his discovery, 19th century researchers tried to preserve his remains even further by smoking the body, a crude method by today's standards, but common at the time. Unlike many bog bodies that show signs of ritual sacrifice, Renswuren Man's death seemed personal and brutal, not ceremonial. No artifacts were found with him, just a body, a hole in the head, and centuries of silence. Today, he stands as one of Europe's more unsettling bog mummies. Number 14, Sethos I. This 3,000-year-old mummy still lies encased in his ornate coffin, a testament to ancient Egyptian embalming mastery. The process that preserved him took 70 painstaking days, carried out by highly trained priests who understood the human body with surgical precision. They removed every internal organ, except the heart, which was believed to be the seat of the soul. Organs were often placed into separate canopic jars or, in later methods, treated and returned to the body. His corpse was then dehydrated using natron salts, followed by delicate padding of linen to restore his shape. Even facial features were enhanced. False eyes, tucked lips, propped cheeks. Layer upon layer of fine linen wrapped the body until it was fully transformed. What remains isn't just a mummy. It's the physical embodiment of a belief system that revolved around death, resurrection, and eternal life. Sethos I wasn't buried. He was prepared to live forever. Number 13, the Speared Man. In the town of Pocklington, archaeologists uncovered a burial that stood out among 160 Iron Age graves. It belonged to a man in his early 20s, buried in a crouched position with his sword placed beside him, clearly someone of status. But after he was laid to rest, 5 spears were violently driven into his body, 4 through the spine, 1 through the groin. This wasn't random. The spears were intentionally positioned to stick out from the mound above. A message to anyone passing by. It's believed this man was a warrior, and the act wasn't out of hatred but ritual, meant to release his spirit or symbolize his power. No other grave at the site showed signs of similar treatment. Over 2,500 years later, the imagery remains powerful. A warrior frozen in death, marked by weapons that honored or restrained him, depending on how you look. Number 12. Lulilako Child Mummies. In 1999, Johann Reinhard and his team scaled the icy summit of Lulilako and found something unforgettable. 3 perfectly preserved Inca children, sacrificed over 500 years ago. 2 girls and a young boy had been placed at the mountain's peak, their bodies left in ceremonial clothing, frozen solid in the dry, thin air. One girl appeared to have been struck by lightning post-mortem, her body scorched but still intact. These children weren't victims of violence or disease. They were offerings, chosen for ritual death in a religious ceremony known as capacocha. Their preservation is so complete, scientists could study their hair, blood, and even what they ate before they died. Unlike brittle mummies of desert tombs, these faces still look eerily lifelike. Silent, expressionless, and surrounded by the clouds, they represent one of the most powerful and unsettling encounters with Inca belief, where death was an offering, not an ending. Number 11. John Torrington. John Torrington was just 22 when he died from lead poisoning during the ill-fated Franklin expedition to the Arctic. He was a petty officer, buried with 3 other crewmates in the frozen tundra after their journey was brought to a grim halt. Over a century later, in the 1980s, researchers exhumed the graves and were stunned by what they uncovered. Beneath blocks of ice, the faces of the men looked back at them, eerily well-preserved, eyes closed, skin intact, barely touched by time. Torrington's features remained clear, though his lips and eyelids had slightly shriveled. Oddly, parts of his face had turned blue, not from frostbite or decomposition, but from pigment leaching out of the wool blanket he'd been buried in. His body became an unintentional time capsule, preserved by the sub-zero ground. He didn't become a legend due to heroism, but through the haunting stillness of a face that never had the chance to return home. Number 10. The 250 Mummies of Bubastian. At the Bubastian tombs in Saqqara, researchers uncovered a massive burial chamber packed with over 250 ancient Egyptian mummies, men, women, and children, many still sealed in elaborately painted wooden coffins. The tomb is believed to be connected to a high-ranking priest named Wati and dates back more than 2,500 years. What sets this find apart isn't just the scale, it's the detail. Among the remains were copies of funerary texts, including a version of the Book of Death, and wrapped bodies in coffins bearing symbols of status, lineage, and religious devotion. 2 mummies stood out, seated figures with golden faces, believed to serve as guardians of the tomb. These weren't just burials, they were orchestrated, symbolic, and full of messages about life after death. The Bubastian mummies give us a clearer window into how the elite approach death, not just as an end, but as a meticulously prepared transition to the divine. Number 9. Elmer McCurdy. Elmer was a small-time outlaw killed in a 1911 shootout in Oklahoma's Osage Hills. His last words were allegedly, "You'll never take me alive." No one claimed his body, so the undertaker embalmed it using an arsenic solution and started charging people a nickel to view the bandit who wouldn't give up, depositing the coin into Elmer's open mouth. 5 years later, a carnival man posing as Elmer's brother took the body, not to bury it, but to put it on the road. For decades, Elmer's remains were passed between sideshows, wax museums, and haunted houses. By the 1970s, his corpse had become so degraded that it was mistaken for a prop. During filming for The $6 Million Man in 1976, a crew member accidentally snapped off his arm, revealing bone. Only then did anyone realize he was real. Elmer was finally buried in 1977 under layers of concrete in Guthrie, ending the strangest posthumous road trip in U.S. history. Number 8. Mixed mummies. On the damp, wind-swept edges of the British Isles, researchers found something that defies usual burial expectations. At least 16 mummified bodies dating between 2200 and 700 BCE were found across multiple sites. The cold, wet environment should have destroyed all trace of them, yet they survived. Many were likely preserved through intentional smoking or burial in bogs rich in tannins, which halted decomposition. But the oddest detail wasn't the preservation, it was the composition. Several of the bodies weren't whole individuals, but composites. One skeleton had a torso and limbs from different people fused into a single mummy. It's believed that parts were intentionally combined, perhaps to honor ancestors or create symbolic figures. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, ritualistic, and deeply complex. While mummification is often seen as a way to preserve identity, these remains suggest something far more stranger. Number 7. Ancient Pompeians. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it didn't just bury Pompeii in ash, it sealed the final moments of its people in raw, horrifying detail. As bodies decomposed beneath layers of ash and pumice, they left behind voids, perfect impressions of those who died. In the 1860s, archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli pioneered a method of injecting plaster into these cavities, revealing startlingly realistic casts of the dead. These plaster figures often show faces twisted in fear, hands raised in final, desperate motions. There's no single famous mummy here. Instead, Pompeii is an entire city frozen mid-disaster, where every figure tells its own tragic story. Adults, children, even animals were immortalized not by choice, but by nature's brutality. Many of these casts now rest in the Naples Archaeological Museum or are still scattered throughout Pompeii itself. They're not just remnants, they're real-time snapshots of panic, silence, and destruction. Number 6. Terrified mummies. In the coastal region of Lambayeque, Peru, archaeologists made a discovery that still unsettles everyone who sees it. They unearthed mummified bodies over 700 years old, buried beneath a massive 7-tiered staircase. But it wasn't the age or location that shocked experts. It was the expressions. Many of the mummies were found in fetal positions, arms covering their faces, as if shielding themselves from something terrifying. Some had wrists bound tightly with rope, raising even more questions. No written records explain what happened here. Were they executed? Did they die in panic? The preservation of their postures suggests that whatever happened, it was traumatic enough to be frozen into their final moments. Alongside the human remains, ritual items and offerings were found, pointing to ceremonial practices, but offering no answers. This is one of Peru's most haunting finds, not because of what's known, but because of what remains unanswered, and the way those faces seem to beg you not to forget them. Number 5. Amenhotep III Mummy. Amenhotep III, ruler of Egypt's 18th dynasty, was originally buried in Tomb W5, 22 in the Valley of the Kings. Centuries later, his remains were relocated to Kfi 35 during the Third Intermediate Period, a protective measure that grouped royal mummies together. His burial wasn't simple. His embalmed body was enhanced with subcutaneous packing, linen stuffed beneath the skin to maintain lifelike features. The technique reflected a shift in royal presentation, aiming for realism even in death. His tomb was meant to also house his queens, Sitamun and Tia, though they were likely buried elsewhere. In 1980, X-rays of Amenhotep and other 18th dynasty royals revealed shared traits with contemporary Nubians, adding layers to the lineage discussion. In April 2021, Amenhotep's mummy was paraded through Cairo during the pharaoh's Golden Parade, moved from the Egyptian Museum to the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. He ruled as a god-king, and over 3,000 years later, his presence still commands spectacle. Number 4. Ginger. Nicknamed Ginger for his golden reddish hair, this naturally preserved man from ancient Egypt is one of the earliest known examples of mummification, dating back over 5,000 years to around 3,400 BCE. He was discovered in Gebaline, buried in a shallow grave where the dry desert sand absorbed the body's moisture. The environment alone prevented decay, leaving his hair, fingernails, and even skin remarkably intact. Long before complex embalming methods were developed, this was nature doing the work. Whether Ginger's preservation was intentional or coincidental remains debated, but the presence of pottery vessels nearby suggests some burial ritual was observed. He wasn't royalty, and there's no grand tomb, just a man laid to rest in earth that happened to be perfect for preserving him. Today, he lies curled in his original position, permanently on display at the British Museum, where you can see it for yourself. Number 3. Atacama Alien Mummy. The Atacama mummy first surfaced in Chile's Atacama Desert and quickly stirred a storm of speculation. Just 15 centimeters long, the remains looked almost extraterrestrial. An elongated skull, small jaw, and only 10 ribs fueled theories about aliens, hoaxes, or secret experiments. But DNA testing shut those ideas down. She wasn't alien, she was human. A female infant, likely stillborn, was born with multiple genetic disorders that gave her that unnerving appearance. Her bones had developed in unusual ways, resulting in her tiny size and skeletal deformities. She's believed to have died about 55 years ago. Her story is now seen less as paranormal and more as a reminder of scientific neglect and misplaced myth. Researchers hope that her genetic profile could offer insight into developmental conditions in other children. Number 2. Infant Encircled Tomb. Near modern-day Lima, the ancient city of Pachacamac revealed a haunting tomb unlike any other. Dating back to around AD 1000, it held the remains of roughly 80 people. Half were infants arranged in a circle around a group of adults. The adults, placed in fetal positions and wrapped in now-decayed textiles, had clay or wooden masks where their heads should be. Many showed signs of severe illness, syphilis, cancer, and other advanced diseases. Some archaeologists believe they may have journeyed to Pachacamac in search of healing, as the site was considered sacred. The babies, however, raise harder questions. There's no clear trauma on their bones, but their arrangement strongly suggests ritual sacrifice, a practice documented in other Yexma burials. Alongside the bodies were remains of animals, llamas, dogs, guinea pigs, also laid to rest as offerings. Whether these infants were offered willingly or out of desperation remains unclear. Number 1. The Great Death Pit. During early 20th century digs at in Mesopotamia, archaeologists uncovered a chilling scene. 6 tombs with no actual tomb structures, just mass burials known as death pits. The largest and most disturbing was the Great Death Pit. 6 armed men and 68 elaborately dressed women lay out in near-perfect rows. The men, wearing helmets and holding weapons, were believed to be guards. The women wore ornate jewelry made from gold, silver, and lapis lazuli. One woman stood out. Her headdress matched that of known Sumerian royalty, leading researchers to suspect she was a high-ranking noble, possibly even a queen. The others were likely sacrificed to accompany her into the afterlife. Some skulls showed signs of blunt force trauma, while most had no visible injuries, pointing to poisoning as the likely cause. Voluntary or forced, no one can say for certain. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and hit that subscribe button for more amazing content like this. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.